Good morning and welcome to Tuesday's Hometown Heroes. It's a wet morning in the North Texas area. It seems like a Monday to me, but yesterday was Memorial Day. So we had Mary and Don Graves were at the, uh, I don't know, 95th annual.
Yep, 95th at Mount Olivet.
How did that go?
It went really good. And somebody said, "Hey, is Rick going to be here?" I said, "Oh, I think I saw him." And I'm like, "I never did see you, but I swore that I saw
No,
you as I was walking up."
I didn't make it there yesterday. So
Yeah, but Don sang the national anthem at the beginning, and toward the end, he sang "God Bless America." And it was a little toasty, but it was incredibly well attended. It was great to see lots of the roll call family out there too.
that's always a great event. Today we have a very special guest, and his name is Eric Newton. And I've known Eric several years. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he was with the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, and went to Vietnam really as a kid. I mean, Eric, you were only about 18.
I was 18 at the time.
18 years old, and Eric shared a lot of stories with me, and it's just unbelievable the experiences that you had in Vietnam, and just the death that you saw and the carnage, and with the armored cavalry. Whenever you all went to out in the field, you stayed out there. I mean, you didn't come back for a long time, weeks or months at a time. So,
yeah, we felt fortunate though compared to the infantry. The infantry, they had what they could carry on their backs when they went out, even though they didn't stay quite as long as we did. But we felt sorry for them because they had to walk, and we got to ride everywhere, and we were glad to give them a ride on top of our armored vehicles and share whatever we had with them when we were out working with them.
And your first job, you weren't in an armored vehicle, were you?
I was in an unarmored vehicle.
Okay. And you were carrying some pretty highly flammable material in your unarmored vehicle.
Yeah, I had the job nobody wanted, but I wanted to be out in the field instead of back in the base camp. And things were a little bit different in base camp. It wasn't quite as glamorous as people thought it was. And so I volunteered to get on that vehicle and go out into the field, just the first opportunity I had. And it was actually designed, it was a cargo track. It was full track, but it was aluminum skin. And so, it had no protection at all. The windshield on it was glass. And this particular one had no 50 caliber shield on top. So you were just kind of out there in the open. I've had people see that picture of me sitting on top, manning that 50, and they said, "Oh my gosh, were you a fool?" I said, "No, that's what the Army, the job they gave you, and you just did it."
Yeah, there's not much protection up there. So
no, there was none. And I've had people say, "Well, that's a staged picture." No, that was a real picture. If you can see the 50 caliber there, and tried to improvise to get a little bit of shade out there. This is on perimeter at a night defensive position, where you pretty much, it was like a wagon train. You went out, you circled the wagons for the day or in the evening for your own protection and defense. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough armored vehicles. And a lot of times I'd be put right on line with the rest of them. And you had I don't know if you can see it there. You can see in the bottom left of the picture, you can see a steel T-post, which is holding up a chain link fence portion that we'd roll up and take with us. And that was to detonate an RPG prematurely before it hit the vehicle.
Yeah, I had a friend that he was in a track unit, and that's what he told me. I thought, why do you have that fence? He showed me some pictures. Why do you have that fence around there? And he told me, that was to stop the RP, so they'd hit the chain link fence and not the vehicle. So how long did you have that particular job where you were driving?
I had that pretty much the whole time I was there because nobody wanted it, first of all. And after a while, I got used to it. I was quite content to do that. But in the meantime, when we would go out, since I was a 1 or 2 man vehicle, then I would end up sharing jobs with other vehicles. If they were short a man, someone was wounded, someone was on leave, and they were short a driver or a gunner, I was able to drive any of those other vehicles or man the machine guns on those too. So a lot of times I was kind of the relief floater guy, and I would go wherever I was needed when I wasn't driving that vehicle or moving it from one spot to another.
Well, what was your primary MOS when you went there?
Well, I trained at Fort Knox in M48 tanks.
Okay.
What I had enlisted for. There again, I didn't want to be the infantry guy and have to walk. My stepdad had been in the Army before he was in the Air Force, and he was in tanks. And he said, you know what? Unless you want to, be out there humping the boonies and carrying that pack, you need to enlist for armor, and that's what I did. And it was a great opportunity to get out and do 3 years instead of 2 to pick that MOS. And but quite frankly, today, after seeing all the drones that they have, I don't think I'd want to be in a tank.
Yeah. Well, those drones can zero in on those track vehicles.
Yeah, you don't even know what's coming until it's there.
Where did you go to basic?
I was at Fort Polk.
Okay. I was there, and I'm in. I don't know if you're a member of a group on Facebook, but there's a group on Facebook with about 11,000 members, and it's people that trained in basic and AIT at Fort Polk. And I see all these pictures now, and it really brings back a lot of memories. That I kind of forgotten about some of the things that went on there. But a lot of people said that Fort Polk was similar to Vietnam.
Louisiana is hot.
Yeah.
It's hot, and the mosquitoes and everything else. Fortunately, I was there in January of '68. So, 2 months later, I was on my way to Fort Knox about the time it was getting springtime there.
Yeah, I was fortunate like that too, because I went in the end of September of 1972 and stayed there until December. So I didn't get to enjoy the mosquitoes and all the humidity and the heat. So, but it prepared people for Vietnam.
Oh, it did. And Tigerland was there. That was that was your last stop before you went to Vietnam if you were in infantry.
Yeah. Fortunately, I wasn't in infantry, so I went to Fort Sam Houston from there for AIT. But whenever you went to your unit, brand new, who was the commander?
In Vietnam, when I got there, George Patton had just assumed command of the regiment. He had already been in country. He was in MACV at the time. And I guess when that 11th Armored Cav had that opening, he ended up getting it.
He was a colonel at the time.
Yeah, he was full bird colonel at the time. And he had the pearl handles. just like his daddy, huh? He was very similar to what you would read about his dad. He was a real go-getter, everything by the book, almost everything. And he was out there, to do what he was supposed to do.
Yeah, a few years ago, Mary and I had the opportunity to spend some time with his daughter, Helen, who, was General Patton's granddaughter. So she came to a roll call and spoke, and then we had an event that night, and she was there, and it was kind of neat because a fella that just passed away just a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, he was in the band in the Army, and he marched in the funeral procession for Patton. So, and played, while they were taking Patton's body to for the funeral. So a lot of history there.
Well, the Pattons have a lot of history that, you know, they were, as far as I know, they may still have the old farm up there, the Patton farm. And some things that a lot of people don't realize is that when he took over the farm after he retired, he named all the fields after the men he lost in the 11th Cat.
Hmm.
Each field was designated with the name of one of the soldiers that he lost under his command.
Yeah. So he was the commander, and you've got some pictures with him, and got to meet him and be under his command. And tell us a little bit about how your unit was, the kind of vehicles. Were they all track vehicles, and about how many people were in those units?
We had 3 squadrons. Each squadron had a tank company, a howitzer battery, and everything else was pretty much armored cavalry assault vehicles, which was basically an M113 that had added, before they went to Vietnam, they added an M60 machine gun on each rear corner with a gun shield and a shield around the commander. And the commander was sitting behind a 50 caliber machine gun with a gun shield on it. And they were fast and they were lethal. They put down a lot of fire.
My goodness.
And
Before you went out with the unit, you were in a mortar attack one night?
oh yeah, we had those quite frequently. They happened in base camp before I ever went to the field. We had a mortar attack in base camp when I was on guard duty. I'd been there maybe a week, and there, you go through the process of retraining again, and doing a little jungle school there before they send you out. And so what you do at night is you pull guard duty around the base camp. Our squadron was out in the field at that time already. Of course, they were out in the field all the time. And so you went in there and did your basic, chores and things like that around the base camp. You did guard duty at night. And on my birthday night, we had a rocket attack. And these were 122 millimeter rockets, somewhat larger than a mortar. And the first one hit in front of the bunker that I was in. And I had already pulled my shift for the night, and they had like what you would see in a ship. They had wooden cots. They weren't really cots. They were just wooden boards nailed up so 2 people would sleep in the back of the bunker. Well, the back of the bunker, you could reach back there. It wasn't very far and touch the person back there. And so when that first explosion hit, the concussion or whatever blew me off the top of that and onto the floor. And we had ammo cans stacked on the floor. And them, and because there just wasn't a lot of storage in there. So I had a back injury from that. At the time I didn't realize it because the adrenaline was pumping so fast. You don't feel anything at that point. And so, we lit up the perimeter expecting a ground attack. And of course, when you start firing out into the wire, you're hitting all the trip flares that are out there, and they're lighting up, and their artillery is putting flares up in the sky. So it was quite a 4th of July spectacle.
Welcome to Vietnam, huh?
Yeah, and so that's why when at 4th of July and now when they have these big shows, I'm not really impressed.
Because how long did the fight last? I mean, you were out there with your M16 and had some machine guns around you, and
yeah, each bunker has an M60 machine gun, and then you've got your personal M16s for each troop. So we had 3 in the bunker, and the machine gun was on my right, and he was laying out a field of fire because you can't tell if there's sappers out there or not. You've got to have a deterrent, so to speak. And so he's moving rounds out with the M60, and the guy on my left got an M16, and he's putting rounds out. Well, those shell casings were hot, and they were dropping down my collar at the time. and I was kind of wiggling, trying to get out from under, because on a bare skin they're hot,
Yeah.
especially if your uniform is pressing it up against your skin. So yeah, it was rather uncomfortable there for a moment.
And so that was your first real experience with war, and
Yeah.
you'd only been there a week.
Yeah, that was the first one. One of the the rockets, one of them made a direct hit onto one of the troop tents. Fortunately, they were all in the field, and no one was in that tent at the time. But it totally leveled it. I think one hit next to the mess hall and tore up some of the area on it. But yeah, they were pretty good with those rockets, except that first one landed in front of the bunker, so they were a little short, but they adjusted them as they went.
You didn't lose any men that night.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
At that time, it's a fairly large place, and you don't have the internet where you can post something on Facebook, so you don't do a lot.
One thing, you were a photographer. I mean, you took a lot of pictures while you were in Vietnam.
I did. I wasn't a good photographer. I bought one of those Instamatic Kodaks, and I ran 35 millimeter slides through it. So unfortunately, the slides had a processing bag when you bought them. So they went back to the States, and I didn't bring them back to myself. So I didn't know how good of a picture I was taking most of the time. And I had them sent back to the States after they were processed. But yeah, I took quite a few slides over there, and got some fairly decent pictures. Some of them weren't. And I didn't realize in the low light in the sunset or in the evening or in the jungle canopy, you weren't taking very good pictures.
But you still have some pictures. That's one thing I didn't take very much of whenever I was in the Army, and I regret that, because I don't have but just a handful of pictures to prove that I was in the Army. So
That's why they give you that 214.
I know it. So you started going out in the field with your unit, and tell us about some of the firefights and things that you were in.
Well, there were occasions where we would go out, and in fact, one of them, the most notable, I suppose, is we had a Medal of Honor recipient that was in a battle, and we were right down the road. There was an ambush. Hal Fritz, if you recall the name.
Yeah, I've been with Hal. I was in a Huey helicopter with Hal on one side and Bob Patterson on the other side. 2 Medal of Honor recipients and a Huey. So I spent a weekend with Hal.
Yeah, he's one heck of a guy. Anyway, he was commanding a platoon, and they were ambushed down the road from where we were at. In fact, there were simultaneous ambushes going on. We were responding to an ambush of a South Vietnamese Army convoy that had just been ambushed along that same road. And we rolled up on that, and of course it started raining, and they were all along the tree line. And what the roam plows had done, the bulldozer was a roam plow, they would push that jungle back about 100 yards from the road so that they couldn't set up right next to the road and pull an ambush. So they would pull ambushes and fall back into the tree line. And so we reacted to that. And eventually they had gunships come in and start strafing that tree line. And that was where, when the battle was over, we had a bunch of bodies to pick up and move to the roadway for burial.
I'm having a little thunder here. You might hear it, people in the audience.
Me too.
But yeah, you had to pick the bodies up and put them in your vehicle sometime to take them to the edge of the road or take them to bury in a mass grave, didn't you?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I detested doing, but you had to do that.
Yeah,
it had to get done, and it was it was something that you had to collect and give even the enemy a proper burial. and instead of just leaving the bodies out there.
Mm. And you were telling me earlier about the smell of those bodies, especially the ones that had been out there in the jungle for a day or two, and how you still can remember that smell. You said it smelled like oil on an engine in a car, so that was burning. So
Yeah, that's about the closest thing that I can describe it as. Back when we had old cars and they were leaking oil everywhere, when we were teenagers, that was that smell that you got when that, the oil was leaking down in the hot parts of the engine and caking up. And that was a very, very similar smell, after a body had been out in the jungle for 2 or 3 days and began to decompose, and the heat, the humidity, and it didn't take long.
the flies and the maggots and
Oh, yeah.
but sometimes you go into villages and they'd have some of the North Vietnamese people that the soldiers that had been killed, and they would kind of hang them up as a symbol to, hey, stay out of our village or we'll kill you.
Yeah, that was the first experience I had with that smell. We were on a convoy going through a village, and as we came into it, I could smell something. I just wasn't sure what it was. And actually, I had the company mascot dog riding in the cab with me, and the dog kind of started going berserk. It smelled it way before I did, and the dog knew what it was apparently,
Mm.
and was kind of going berserk in there and I couldn't figure out what was going on until we came into the beginning of the village, and there were 3 bodies hanging there, and that I was told that was a kind of a warning for the Viet Cong or the NBA not to come in and into the village and try to, start the tax process, steal their young men to become soldiers, or steal their food and rice.
So the mascot dog stayed with you a lot, didn't he?
It did. Before I went out in the field, we had several dogs back in the Benoit area where we were sending out supplies to the field units. And at some point, and some of these dogs had come over on the ships in 1966. You had maybe a single person that had a dog. And when they got shipped over to Vietnam, they didn't know what to do with it. And so they smuggled them onto the ships. So we had quite a few dogs, and apparently either whoever, brought that dog over originally may have been killed. I don't know the background on that particular dog, but it was actually the company mascot. And just a kind of a funny story. We had a formation one morning, and the first sergeant was out there, and he was kind of one of those grumpy guys.
Those first sergeants are kind of like that, huh, Mary?
Hey.
He was kind of well, you had to maintain order and discipline, and so he was out there holding formation and yelling like he always did. And 2 of the dogs walked up behind him. One was a male dog, and you know where this is going.
Oh no!
And walked up, just strolled. The whole formation's out there watching this. Strolls up behind the first sergeant and lifts his leg. And so from that day forward, all the dogs were, either get them out of here or we're going to euthanize them. So I was going to the field, and so I took the dogs with me.
One of your stories, you had the dog, and I guess you were starting to get attacked, and you just threw him in the Jeep or in your track, and I think up top, didn't you?
Oh, that was that was on Thanksgiving. I had received a care package from home, sardines and Vienna sausage and things like the luxury items. And there happened to be one of those aluminum pans of Jiffy Pop. And so we'd had dinner, pretty nice dinner that they flew out to us. And so it was just before sunset, I was going to pop that Jiffy Pop. So I took a knife and peeled off a chunk of C4 and put it in the locking mechanism on the back deck of the 113 flamethrower unit. And in the back of this thing are big white pods, and that's where the napalm's mixed at. or that's where it's stored at. It's actually mixed on a truck and loaded into there. And so this thing was full of napalm inside. But we're cooking on the back deck of this thing and got the Jiffy Pop going. And the next thing you know, we got incoming mortars coming in. And so, there's about 4 or 5 of us sitting there. It's a 2-man crew because there's no room inside for any other crew. It's just the vehicle commander and the driver. And so not knowing what to do or where to go, you look for the nearest spot. And that was it. It's either that or run out across the field and try to get somewhere safer. So I ran out and grabbed the dog and ran to the front driver's hatch and dropped it down into the driver. Had gone down ahead of me and dropped it down to the driver. And then I climbed down. And in the meantime, I was hit by some of the shrapnel from the flying mortar rounds that came in. And so it was a kind of a comedy. You laughed at it afterward, but you weren't laughing at the moment, because a bunch of the guys that were sitting in the back crawled into and intertwined with these tanks and hoses for safety. But the back ramp was still down, and there were still incoming mortars and shrapnel flying. I ended up in the driver's seat. I'd never driven one of those before. It's very similar to what I was driving, but I didn't have a ramp. And you got to have the side lever that will bring that. But you have to start the engine first and then raise the ramp. Well, as I'm raising the ramp, I'm thinking there's C4 burning back there in the corner of that ramp.
Oh,
and I
no.
said, what's going to happen when it hits? And that's where the explosion is going to come in at, because that's how that stuff operates. And so I would bring it up as far as I could, looking in the back, and then I'd let off the gas and the ramp would start going back down. And of course, everybody in the back is hollering and screaming, get the ramp up, because, when that ramp starts going down, there's still shrapnel flying out there. And so anyway, it burned out and got the ramp closed and set through that. And of course, everything on the perimeter opens up because you're fearing a ground attack. And so that's one of those things that when it was all over with and the adrenaline stopped pumping, all you can do is laugh at it. At everybody hollering and screaming, get the ramp up. And so it became a pretty good joke.
And this, you got injured, and that's where you received the Purple Heart from that injury that night. And there were other guys that were injured, some pretty bad, and they sent the medevacs in, and you said, "Hey, I'm staying here." And then you went to you didn't go to the hospital, and that caused a few problems at home, didn't it?
Oh yeah, what occurred was, they gather up all the wounded. They've got a medevac coming in inbound, and the medics are there, and they're tagging you with all the information on it that they're going to treat you for when they get you back to a field hospital. And so they walked us out to the LZ, and of course it's dark then. And the helicopter comes in. I jump on, and I'm looking. There's too many people for this helicopter. And I said, you know what? And I didn't really know how bad I was, wounded. I said, you know what? I'm just going to hop off and let them take these guys on in. And I just casually strolled back to my vehicle in the dark. And so when they put that tag on you, that stays with you. And then the helicopter, the medic on the helicopter takes it's kind of like a parking ticket, I guess. He peels that part off, and that goes to the hospital with that other information on it. Well, they got that information at the hospital, logged me in as being there or at some point in time, and then couldn't find me. And so they logged me out. And so my mail was then forwarded from base camp to that surgical hospital. And the mail came to the hospital, and they looked for me, and I wasn't there. So they stamped it on there, 98th I think it was the 98th Evacuation Hospital, not here. That mail went back home.
Oh, no.
And so you can imagine, well, yeah. So you can imagine what happened then. Hey, his mail was at a hospital. He's not there anymore. What happened? So my folks were on the horn with the Red Cross, and the Red Cross was sending a telegram over there inquiring about, my status. And so, yeah, it created a little bit of a shock back up.
When did you actually receive your Purple Heart from that action that night?
That was in November. I think it was in January
Okay.
that finally got around. It wasn't an immediate thing. Paperwork was slow. In fact, a lot of times paperwork got lost over there. And you were out, and it wasn't a priority to give you your awards.
Yeah. At one time, you were out in the field, and you had a new little buck sergeant that was one of those shake and bake guys that was all of a sudden in command, and he caused some problems, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Unfortunately, that they went out on a couple of guys went out on an ambush patrol, and you do that just before it gets completely dark, so you can have a little bit of visibility. And being new, he hadn't been there that long, and he went out past the sit-down mark. And when you go out there, you better be in your sit-down mark, because if artillery has to be called in or they have to come rescue you, you need to be where you're supposed to be. And so he went out and went past the point, turned the guys around, and came back. And when they came back, that's what they teach you in basic training. From the beginning, you never go down a trail and take the same trail back. And they got ambushed. And at that point, it was dark. They were on the edge of a jungle clearing, and they were caught out in the open. And they were taking a lot of rounds in. And this new buck sergeant was popping the flares, the hand flares. And when he did that, he was exposing their position. And so a good friend of mine that I went through training with was on that ambush patrol. And he was wounded, and the sergeant was wounded.
The sergeant, was he wounded by the bad guys or the good guys?
We don't know.
Crazy things happen in war.
That's right.
When you're putting the rest of the squad in jeopardy and you're not listening, it's you got to stop it. And so we don't know. There was a lot of bullets flying.
One of your jobs sometime was to go down into the tunnels, and that had to be pretty scary.
Well, fortunately, that wasn't my job all the time.
Yeah.
They had what they called the tunnel rats that would do that, but occasionally, if you were out like that day, we were on a 3-man patrol checking the area out, and we stumbled across this tunnel. And so it was kind of like flip a coin. Somebody's got to go down there and look at it. So I was the new guy, so the coin that I flipped probably had 2 sides to it. And so I went down there to take a look. Yeah, it's you don't know what you're going to get into. You don't even know when you drop down into that bottom floor if it's a punji pit under there. You're going to go on through and have those nicely fermented steaks run up through your boots and things, or through your leg. And so yeah, that was quite scary going down there the very first time. But
I bet it was.
And God bless him, you had guys that did that all the time. And so just my 1 or 2 experiences weren't pleasant for me.
At the Vietnam Museum over in Mineral Wells, have you ever been over there?
I went on opening day, yes.
Okay, because they have some of those booby traps and things like those punji sticks, and showing how they go right through your boot. And you were pretty messed up whenever you hit one of those.
Yeah, you had the later model boots had the steel plates in the bottom, which helped. But a lot of times, rather than just getting your boot, they'd go up the side of your leg, as you were coming down into those. And they would dip them in feces, and so that you'd get really, really sick and be taken out of commission for a while. And I think the big thing was, is they wanted to wound you and make it to where it had to take 3 or 4 people to take care of you and get you out of there. And that was one of the strategies that they had.
It worked well.
It did. It did.
And there's another time when you got some orders. You'd found, I think, some tunnels, and you got some orders not to engage. And then the interpreter started talking to the people in the tunnels to come out. And because you followed orders not to engage, several guys got killed that day.
Yeah, that was one of the regrets that you have. You try to do what's right, follow the instruction, but sometimes you just have to second guess it. And that was probably one of those times I should have second guessed it. But what happened was we had a prisoner that they'd taken earlier and in that area. And so what they wanted to do was gather intel from it. So we went on a 4 or 5 man patrol with that prisoner and an interpreter. And it was pretty much wide open area, dry rice paddies at that time. It was the summertime. And so we went out to a tree line and he was going to show us a tunnel. And we came right up to it and I'm within a foot of it and he's pointing at it. And they've taken a trap door with leaves and grass in it. And it's like a picture frame. It fell right down perfectly into the hole and covered it because it was framed out. And he lifted some wires out and set it over to one side. And so, we started kind of believing the intel that he was giving us. And so then we began to move on down the trail, and there was a tripwire across the trail. And I was walking point, and he stopped me. The interpreter stopped me and said, "Stop." He said, "He's telling us there's a tripwire across this trail." And sure enough, there was a hand grenade with a wire attached to it. And a few more steps and it would have been me. And so we began to believe his story. I said, he's giving us accurate information at this point. And so we started listening to the rest of the stories he had to say. And he told us that there was a North Vietnamese pay officer in a bunker complex, about 100 yards from there. I don't do the clicks because nobody knows what those are. About 100 yards from there. And so, I called it back in. And the word was, no, stay put. We're going to send some armored cavalry assault vehicles out. And, my plan before I talked to them, I said, we'll go in there, we'll sneak up on them and take them by surprise. Well, you can't take anybody by surprise with those armored vehicles coming down the road. And you could hear them, a mile away. And in fact, the 11th Cav, that used to be one of their things that they would do. They'd fire up a bunch of loud ACAVs and take off out into the jungle and say, "Here we are, come get us." And go look for a fight. And so anyway, the vehicles came out and proceeded to the bunker complex. They heard them coming. And they got down inside the bunkers. They're actually tunnel type bunkers. And so we had one of the NCOs was there, the interpreter, and giving them a chance to give up. And the interpreter was telling them, "Hey, come on out. We're not going to do anything to you. We want you to surrender." And from one of the air vents, one of them threw a grenade out right in the middle of all these guys. And it took out 3, the senior NCO, another NCO, and a Spec 4. And then, at that point on, it's on, okay? And Patton was pissed, that he lost those guys. And his helicopter's flying around, and it's getting late in the afternoon at that point. And, he's going to find them. He's surrounding this area with everything he's got. And so it went into dark, but they got them. They got them all. And they actually got the money. And the money was in US dollars because that's the currency that was acceptable there. So the North Vietnamese would bring down dollars and pay their troops. And which goes into another story that you don't even know about. So they've got maybe, and I'm trying to think how much it was back then. It might have been $4,000 or $5,000 in in those days, which was a lot of money in 1969. And so I always wondered what happened to that money. And in 1992, we had a reunion in San Antonio, Texas. George Patton was our guest speaker. He was the keynote speaker. And fortunately, I was escorting one of the daughters of one of our KIAs, and so they put me at his table across from him, and with the daughter. And so you couldn't get a word in edgewise, because before the banquet started, everybody there getting autographs and stuff. So when the program started and it got kind of quiet, he looked over at my name tag, and it gave my troop and the year. Well, he remembered that date. And he said, "Were you there?" I said, "Yes, sir. I was on the initial patrol with the prisoner when all that started." And he sat back in his chair, like you could see the trouble on his face, when he recalled that memory. And so I said, "Well, he's kind of going through a situation there." And I said, "I need to liven things up." And I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I've always wondered what happened to that money." And he got a big grin on his face, and he leaned over the table and he whispered, he said, I sent it to our guys' families."
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
I
an
never told
honorable
that
thing.
story until after he passed away.
And let's just kind of remember those guys who were Sergeant First Class Garrett, Sergeant McLean, and Spec 4 Gerald Carr.
Yeah.
Were those three men that lost
correct.
their life that day. So, but you saw other guys. I think there was another commander where you had to go recover the body, and he was kind of wrapped around his 50 caliber machine gun in two pieces. And
yeah, their vehicle hit a very large mine, and it almost took the center belly out of that armored personnel carrier.
my
And
goodness.
of course, he being in the commander's hatch, it cut him in half, and a leg was actually wrapped around the 50 caliber, and we had to go out there and gather up those body parts.
That was Lieutenant Richard Cole was
Yeah.
that man's name. Just young guys getting killed over in Vietnam.
Yeah, and after a while, you just became, I guess, flatline with that kind of stuff. You couldn't let it bother you. It certainly bothered you in the beginning until you just you got used to it. I mean, it was like you didn't want it to happen, you didn't want to see it, but it just part of what was going on right then, and you couldn't fall apart.
Did you feel like you were going to make it out alive, or were there times when you just said, "Hey, today might be the day"? Or
well, any day could have been the day. I mean, it just takes a split second. It takes a landmine. It takes an RPG. It takes a sniper's bullet, and you don't know. And so it's just one of those things. Driving down the freeway here, you never know if you're going to have a head-on collision. Every day could be your last. And so you just have to tune it out, and a lot of guys get that 1,000-yard stare they talk about because they're just numb from it. And some people handle it better than others. And it was kind of, I guess, depending on the way you were brought up, maybe. And so, everyone handled it differently.
I'm just kind of going through these pictures while you're talking so people can have an idea of how things were in Vietnam. And you left Vietnam, went to Germany, and you got a different job over there, didn't you?
Yeah, I got over there, and fortunately, a captain from the 11th Cav came in right after I got there. And of course, we're both wearing the black horse patch on the combat side. And next thing you know, I'm getting promoted. And they needed a crypto team chief because the sergeant that was in there was about to get out of the military, 2-year draftee. And so they sent me to crypto school up in Garmisch. And Garmisch, as you know, is the Olympic site up there at one point. Unfortunately, I was a Texan and I didn't ski. We could see the ski slope from the barracks. And so I went into crypto at that point and was with the S2. And so I had a really good job. You know, it's myself, and they brought in one other spec 4 and immediately promoted him to 5. And, you know, he handled all the teletype. I was just basically, I couldn't even type. And I said, I can't do this job because I can't run a teletype. And he said, well, you're going to supervise. You're going to go to school and you're going to do the slow typing and graduate, and then you're going to supervise. And so that's what I did the rest of the time I was there.
Then you got out of the Army, came back to Texas, had a few jobs, and then you started building homes.
That's correct.
In South Lake and Colleyville, Possum Kingdom. Those are some nice homes that you built, I'm sure.
Well, it was a move up process. You start building the smaller ones and get your feet wet, and then you progress to some that are bigger and bigger. And I look at the houses today and I said, oh my gosh, I thought we were building big houses.
Built some
out to Westlake and places like that. There's some massive homes.
Yeah.
And then in 2005, that's your wife passed away early that year. And then in September of 2005, you went on another adventure, didn't you?
Yeah. We had a film crew that in 2001, right before 9/11, had started a documentary on the 11th Cav in Vietnam, and they completed that documentary. And then when Iraq came up in 2005, they took the 11th Cav out of their training position at Fort Irwin. They were the premier trainers, and they were training everybody that went to the desert before they went. And, you know, they were honing their skills and getting them ready for that type of combat. So they must have been a little bit desperate on, you know, new units over there. So they pulled them out of their training position and sent them over. And the film crew said, gee, you know, we'd like to go over there and do a sequel. And can you make that happen? I said, well, let me contact some folks I know at the Pentagon, and they immediately approved it. And so, you know, as we're getting ready to go, you know, I'm going, you know, I'm 55 years old. And so I got to get in shape, because one of the requirements are that if the commander of the operation does not feel like you're physically fit to go on the mission, they have, you know, the authority to say no. And I said, I'm not going to be denied. So I was at 24-hour fitness. I had a private trainer and another place. So I was determined I was going to get fit, probably the best shape I was in before the 20s. And so did that. And as we're about 30 days out, of course, on the news every night in 2005, you know, that's on the news. There's a bombing in the marketplace. There's, you know, this building is blown up. There's this attack. And so the camera guy's calling me up, and he said, hey, did you see the news tonight? I said, yeah. You know, it's on every night like that. And he said, but who's going to look out after us? And I said, well, I'm going to look out after you, and the best unit in the Army that trained every day to do this stuff is going to look after both of us. I said, I wouldn't want to go with anybody else. They're absolutely the best unit to go with, that knows, you know, what they're doing and have trained on it 24/7, 8 days a week, you know. And so as we got within about a week out, and I already had the plane tickets were already bought into London and into Kuwait. And then he says, you know, I said, I really need to know. I said, because I got to turn the ticket back over, you know. And I never got a call back. And so when I hung up the phone, I called a tank commander, a buddy of mine. And I said, you know, you got wind of this, that I was going. I don't know how you did, but I told you that if the news guy decided not to go, you'll be the first one I called. And I said, you get on the phone, get a plane ticket and meet me in New York. We're going to fly into Kuwait from there. via London, and you get your ticket, and I'm going to let this other ticket go, and you're going with me, but you're going to carry a camera. And he did. And so we headed off in that direction. I gave him a quick course on the 35 millimeter SLR camera, and I carried a Canon camcorder, the same one that the Hollywood guys were going to take. And we took off for Kuwait.
And ended up in Iraq.
Yeah, we ended up in Iraq. We had news media credentials that they issued us. And of course, when we're in Kuwait, I don't know if you know anything about how that worked. You've got to go to news media school for about 3 days. And so there was a National Guard colonel that was in charge of the flights into Baghdad. And I said, you know what? I said, we're going to be with 11th Armored Cav when we get there. We really don't need to go to school. You know, we're anywhere we're going to go, they're going to be with us. And so he got us on the next flight the next morning on a C-130 out of Kuwait into Baghdad. And so from that point on, we didn't have we had our independent news credentials, but we didn't have the Holy Grail news credentials. So that presented a problem in a few places that we went to, like the dining facility in the green zone. And we would generally be with the command sergeant major or the colonel when we went to eat there. And we went to the dining facility in the green zone where all the top brass were eating at. And we just had our basic news credentials. And the lieutenant checking ID says, where's your other? Well, we weren't issued these other credentials. Said, well, you're going to have to go over here and be searched. And the colonel was arguing with him, no, these are our guys, you know. And we're in uniform just like everybody else has got. And so they send us over there where the guys searching, you know, like civilian contractors and things like that. And we go over there, and of course our uniform says Vietnam vet over the pocket where U.S. Army tape is at. And he looks at, and he's an E6. He looks at those things and he said, Lieutenant, I'm not searching these guys. and he said, come on through, sir. And I said, oh, this guy's going to get busted, you know. And he had that much respect. He said, I'm not searching these guys. And we went on into the dining facility.
My goodness.
And hopefully he didn't get a lot of flack from that.
In the film that you took, the movies, there's been 2 documentaries that have used some of your film. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, we gave the film to the original film company that was supposed to go with us. And they did 2 DVD documentaries.
And now you are the assistant commander, is that what it is, of the...
Senior Vice Commander of...
Okay, senior, I knew there was a title to that. And that's of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Chapter 1513.
Right.
Mid-Cities chapter. And you're doing a lot of stuff with the Purple Heart now.
We are, and glad you brought that up. There's one of the photos. There's a local barbecue place in South Lake that we designated a Purple Heart restaurant. We have a lot of our monthly meetings there, and we move them around a bit, but they're gracious in letting us use their indoor-outdoor room right there to have our meetings monthly. And we do a lot of community projects. We designate, we have awards for area high school students that are in our OTC every graduation. We give them awards for being in our OTC. That is Purple Heart Baseball on the screen now. We will be at the National Purple Heart Day at the ballpark in Arlington this August on National Purple Heart Day. What we'll do is we'll go out onto the field as a guest during the national anthem, and we'll have all the Purple Heart recipients lined up on the field and get a very, very great welcome from the crowd.
Absolutely. I've got to do that several times, and I'm going to be there in August with you. So
yes, yeah. And we also do the Armed Forces Bowl game. That's one of them there. That's one of our Medal of Honor recipients. in between us. And we do that every December, generally, and they're in December. And that entire area back behind there is a suite that we're in. And somebody looks familiar there.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that was one of my things on my bucket list, was to ride in the stock show parade.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, I got to do that, take pictures of your group. So,
yeah, and we do the stock show parade. They furnish us with 4 Clydesdales that pull those floats. And let me tell you what, they're stunning. The crowd really loves them. A year before last, that was the People's Choice Award. Now, I says it wasn't the float, it was the horses.
that's right.
That people like. And, you know, if you're in this area, if you'll hit that code with your cell phone, you can get some information on our chapter. And there's a lot of events that we do. We also do the what else is there? Dove hunts. There's organizations that invite us in on dove hunts. Everything's paid for. All you do is show up. And there's fishing events. There's a lot of people that are appreciative of our combat wounded,
Absolutely.
that want to do things for them and sponsor events for them. Very worthwhile. It's not just like you're a member, but you get to join in on doing these events.
You know, one thing that we've talked about with roll call and in the past is that we need to get roll call designated as a Purple Heart organization. And I'll get with Lisa Marie and see if we can make that happen. Because
I see a couple of our folks there, Bob and Rose Conqueray.
Yeah, right back there.
Yeah. I think I see another 1 or 2 back there, but they're a little bit blurry back there in the back of the picture.
Yeah, it was a pretty good crowd.
But you stay pretty busy for a retired guy.
Yeah, I do. And people ask me about this event or this day, and I said, well, let me look at my calendar first before I commit, because I sometimes overload myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have 4 events coming up with that Purple Heart baseball. 4 days in a row, we've got events.
Yeah. And, you know, you kind of turned me on to that Sergeant Major, that she's going to receive her 2nd Purple Heart. And I've watched some of her videos, and she's incredible. I'm so anxious to meet her.
Yeah, I will feel unworthy standing next to her.
Absolutely.
She's that impressive. That's Gretchen Evans, Command Sergeant Major Gretchen Evans.
Yeah.
She's going to receive another Purple Heart as well as a combat action badge at that ceremony. It's going to be hosted by Ross Perot Jr.
And Terry Burgess, he and his wife Elizabeth say they're proud members of the Military Order of Purple Heart in honor of their son Brian. So our Gold Star parents and our Gold Star families certainly are grateful for the Military Order of the Purple Heart.
And we are the largest chapter in the Dallas, in Texas, actually. So we have a pretty good group, about 500 members.
That is a good group.
Yeah.
That's about how many we.
And Lisa is very instrumental in getting these events done. Without her, we would be. She's a powerhouse. Oh, I'm telling you. And, you know, she gets those done. And once we fill these spots in the events, like the Armed Forces Bowl, with our local people, we reach out all across Texas and part of Oklahoma and bring extra people in to these events also.
And you know, Eric, Amy King is listening, and she made a comment. She's with the American Legion Post 655 in Haltom City. That's where we held our war stories. And they have a really good sized facility, and they can do, you know, larger groups. So she's saying, you know, bring your group on over if you're looking for a place to go, because they've got a pretty decent facility over there.
It's a great facility. I was there for War Stories a couple of months ago. And
okay.
I didn't realize how large it was.
Yeah.
I forgot that you were there. So
yeah, me too.
Mary, you and Mary did cross paths there.
Yeah.
Paul Lemon, one of our friends, wanted to know if the award presentation ceremony is open to the public, and they usually are, aren't they?
Say that again, Blake.
He wanted to know, is the award presentation ceremony open to the public? Some of them are. I think the one for Gretchen, it won't be open to the public.
No, that was invitation only.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be on the news that evening.
I bet it will be.
Yeah.
Well, we've enjoyed having you as a guest, Eric, and I look forward to seeing you soon, and certainly in August, because I think you kind of booked me up for about 4 events right in a row, and one of them is with Gretchen, so I'll be able to capture some pictures there with her.
Right.
So that's going to be a great time, and we just appreciate you sharing your stories and being our guest today. And, we're just really honored to have you share those stories and to see how, you came from Vietnam to get back in society. I mean, it wasn't a good time for Vietnam veterans. And you came back in society, had a good career, and now you're still giving back through your involvement with Purple Heart. And then also you're doing a park and some memorials up in South Lake, isn't it?
That's in Colleyville.
Okay.
Colleyville is
They all run together.
yeah. Well, we have to get it right just for the Colleyville people.
Yeah.
But now they're going to do an entire park. It's a memorial park with a band shell and a bandstand. They're taking up more than a city block next to City Hall.
Wow.
Where they've been having, events, car shows and things like that. So they're going to have individual walls for each conflict and war. It's going to be a very nice, I would say it will be a place where schools will bring busloads of children to look at this memorial. And it's going to be done right. And they're, what's odd, they didn't want to take any outside donations.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yep.
Right.
Got to get you at roll call. We need you to come tell your story.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me.
And we've got a couple of friends that do oral. They're oral historians. Have you ever sat down with any oral historians and just told your stories?
I have not.
Okay.
Kelly Krager. We'll have to hook you up with Kelly Krager with Texas Tech. He does that huge program through Texas Tech, and he did when we were on base, and Jim Thomason was sharing his story. Kelly actually moderated that for us. He's awesome. And Chuck Hodge does it as well. So we'll get you hooked up, because Texas Tech needs to have your story saved in their archives.
And they're the largest resource for the Vietnam War.
They are. He's part of that program.
And also, I'm sure they'd be interested in getting copies of your pictures too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Preserve that history.
Yeah, and unfortunately, at our age, the Vietnam vets, our guys are passing away daily. And
Yeah.
we don't know where all those pictures are going once the family gets them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, and we will be talking to you soon.
Great. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you, sir.
Wow.
Well, what stories we have.
I'm telling you.
And
there's so many folks like him that are living right next door to people, and they don't even know it. They don't, we've lost that knowing your neighbor and reaching out and really getting to know him well enough to know that he may have neighbors that don't even have any idea, what he's done and where he's been. So we need to definitely share stories, which is something that you and I are so blessed to be able to do here every Tuesday.
we are. And he sent me a lot of stories, and I can't wait to have him roll call and go through those stories with our group at roll call, because so many of those veterans there, those Vietnam veterans, they're going to, identify with that, and hopefully we can get more of them to come forward and start telling their stories.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Because that group is really, it's hard to get them to talk just like the others, but and as he said, and it's not even as much about age with that particular group as it is all of the things that they experienced in war, the Agent Orange and everything else. We've lost so many of the Vietnam veterans from the exposure to so many things that they were exposed to. So
absolutely.
yeah.
And last Friday we had a great roll call.
We did. And, Dwayne shared his story, and it never dawned on me till I was talking to a couple yesterday who said, is that we'd really like to be able to go on that Normandy trip that he talked about, but we're not World War II. And so I think there was some confusion, and we'll get that corrected with our whole group. But if anybody is interested in going on the D-Day, revisiting the beaches of D-Day, the Normandy trip, let us know, and we'll get you in contact with Dwayne Lee, because he takes small groups, and it's not about you don't even have to have served. You just want to go to Normandy in a small group and actually do the tour. It's a great trip. It's, the cost is, I think, about $4,000 per person. But that covers, pretty much all of your expenses to get you there, and, not obviously going to cover absolutely everything. You're going to buy your own trinkets and all that kind of stuff. But anybody can go on that. And what a neat thing. So when he went through some of that, there were things that a lot of folks were like, wow, I never even knew that. And he had to cut it down to fit our timeline, because we're at, about 25 minutes on average for a speaker. And so he couldn't share everything, but when you go on that trip, you will get to experience and walk in those footsteps of where the soldiers were, and everything that, where they went, what they experienced. You'll get a real firsthand look at everything. And it won't be in a group of, 50 or 100. It'll be in a group of 10 to 12, which to me is a better way to do something like that. So anybody is welcome to get with Dwayne and go on that group. And we can certainly connect anyone who's interested.
That's a good trip. People that get to go will certainly be blessed and learn a lot of history.
Yeah, my plan is to go on one of those two he's doing next year. And he said if he's got more people than he can take in two, he'll add trips.
That's good.
My plan is to definitely be in one of those groups.
Yesterday, we observed, I don't like to say celebrate. We didn't celebrate Memorial Day, but we observed Memorial Day. And, there's carry the load. There were thousands and thousands of people over there, and Terry and Elizabeth Burgess were there with their Gold Star Parents Retreat booth. There's just so many of our friends that were there, Doug Peterson, and on and on and on. But we just need to remember, what Memorial Day is for. And we just don't forget those children of our friends, like right. Brian Burgess was killed in action March 29th, 2011. And from that, Terry and Elizabeth started the Gold Star Parents Retreat. And, I've worked with them, gone to the retreats for about 5 or 6 years now, and met hundreds of Gold Star parents and heard the stories of their children. So let's not forget those that have died, and then the families that they leave behind.
Amen.
So this month in roll call, we're going to have Liberty Phillips.
We are.
With Bridge to History and Operation Meatball. Just a little over a week away before the D-Day 80th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And Liberty's going to be doing some jumping. She's with a parachute team, and they're going to do some reenactments. So, yeah. And I know that the 136th Airlift Wing out at Carswell, out at NASJRB, they're taking one of their C-130s. They've got it kind of repainted to looked like one of the World War II airplanes. And I don't know who they're going to take to jump, but probably some people from the 82nd and the 101st. So.
Yep.
Uh,
And so
great.
one of the things that we're going to do with her speaking too, is we're going to get a few of the kids that have gone on those trips or have gone to events with Bridge to History. We're going to get a few of those there so that they can share also. So how neat that's going to be. So I think the June luncheon is going to be special just because we're taking all that history in the room and these young people, because she's taken middle school kids. That's, and we've had Liberty on the show, so people have heard her story, but she's going to be able to connect those young people who want to know and understand history right with people right there in that room that have lived so much of the history that she's trying to make sure that they learn, and not only learn, but then go and teach and bring to other young people. So that luncheon is going to be definitely very special. So hopefully the RSVP link won't open until the 10th of June. We fill it up before we get 2 weeks out. So we don't want to open it 3 weeks out. And then we got people that have things that come up and we got to play the whole cancellation. It's a whole other thing we don't want to do. So want people to get a chance to make their plans for June, but save the date, June 28th, and make sure that on the 10th of June, you get out there and get your RSVP in, because it will fill up very fast.
Yeah, and it's just a great event. We just had a great meeting. Always do. I never have been to a bad roll call meeting.
No, food's always good. The company's great. People start getting there at 9:30 in the morning, and this month was no different. Had everybody there getting lots of hugs and telling stories and sharing what's been going on in the last month. So, it's just really fun, and it's just like going home. It's family. Absolutely. And anyone can be a part of our family.
It's kind of like the mafia. Once you're in, you're in, aren't you?
I don't know if I go quite that far, but.
Well, Mary, we had a great show today, and just thank Eric for being part of it. At roll call the other day, we got to meet Tank Gunner in person. We had him on a few weeks ago, the author that's written 10 books, Vietnam veteran, and that was great to see him. And Bill Pugh, we got to visit with him. So it's good to see all these guys in person that you've only had on the podcast and hadn't met them in person. So just remember, if you've got some stories you want to tell, you want to be a guest on our podcast, just give us a holler. You can go to roll call, or you can reach out to me at cowtown@usa.net, cowtown@usa.net, and we'll see if we can get you scheduled.
Yeah,
because we'd love to hear your story.
We would.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being a part of this Hometown Heroes podcast, and we'll see you next week. Same